Okay, so let's start with this. I don't really know what circumstances the author was facing here. I'm not particularly familiar with CBR. Regardless of the circumstances around it though, the author did a bad job. This is a bad article, and part of the social contract that you sign when you put content out online is that it can be criticized. Believe me, I know. Having said that, this is a bad article about a video game, okay? No one threw a puppy off a roof here. No one involved in this needs or deserves a mob going after them. Please don't do that. If I find out that you did, I'm gonna stop making videos like this. All right, let's get into it. Number 8, stalling the fight with endless techniques. Certain moves can be repeatedly used against an opponent, preventing them from attacking or even fighting back, which proves to make a match last longer, but only to the benefit of the player using the technique. Some of these moves that are classified as stalling techniques are banned from tournaments. Sonic's homing attack, where he curls up into a ball and moves swiftly across the stage, is one example. Jesus Christ. Oh no. So, couple big things leading off here. Stalling in some Smash games is an actual legitimate problem. In Melee, Peach has a very famous one where she just continuously bashes against the side of the stage and is all but impossible to get to. And then in Brawl, Meta Knight has the even more famous infinite dimensional cape because he clearly needed that. So yeah, stuff like this was always going to end up banned from tournaments. So at face value, this is actually correct. And then certain moves can be repeatedly used against an opponent, preventing them from attacking or even fighting back. That doesn't work for those examples, but it does work for something like, say, Ice Climber's chain grabs, which later in Melee's life or in Brawl would be handoffs instead. But the same general principle, you are not allowed to get your opponent past 300% or is considered stalling. But I'm very confident none of that's what they're talking about, because the example they gave is Sonic's homing attack, where he curls up into a ball and moves swiftly across the stage. Okay, so let's start by stating the obvious here. Sonic's homing attack is not the move they're talking about. That one does not move him rapidly across the stage. That has him home in on his opponent. The author here has clearly mixed it up with the spin dash and the spin charge. That's not great, and I'm already starting to get the feeling that the author's probably not played a whole lot of Smash, but at the very least, you know, they're all moves where you curl up into a blue ball and do something, and Sonic has way too many of those. So if you're a more casual fan, I can see the confusion to an extent. Not to the extent where you should be writing an article about it, to be clear, but I can see the confusion. The part I really don't get, though, is that this article is called 8 Smash Bros tricks that aren't allowed competitively. Sonic's spin dash and spin charge are allowed competitively. They've never been banned. In fact, not only are they perfectly legal, but camping with them is also perfectly legal. I know a lot of people would love to see them banned, but as is, go watch any single game of high-level Ultimate Sonic play, and you're gonna see those moves used constantly. And I do mean constantly. They're some of the single most spammed moves in Smash because they're so rewarding on hit, they're so hard to react to, so fast, so non-committal. So I would bet good money that the person who wrote this has not sat through a single competitive match of Sonic in Ultimate, which, don't get me wrong, a lot of people are in their camp, but they were the one who decided to write about it. There's a game show I like called I'm Actually on Dropout, where contestants need to point out what's wrong with a statement given, and what'll happen sometimes is they'll correctly call out the wrong part of the statement, but they'll keep talking, and the explanation they give for why it's wrong is so off that they lose the point. That's what's happened here. You could have written this out, moved on to point 7, and I would have given it to you. And also, yeah, essentially wasting time creates a disappointing match for everyone. There's a huge difference between a fan base being annoyed by something and it actually being formally ban-worthy, and this article is theoretically about the latter point. We'll see how much they stick to that. Some character-specific abilities are considered overpowered. Point 7. And the example they're giving here is Cloud charging his limit. Is this from Smash 4 or Ultimate? It's kind of hard to tell in that lighting. Oh no! Among fans, there's a lot of heated debate around which Smash Bros. Characters are overpowered and which of those should be either nerfed or banned completely. True, that does happen constantly. As far as tournaments go, the most recent debate has been on Cloud, especially when it comes to his limit charge ability. So when I start scrolling down and I just get to this part here, I'm actually still somewhat willing to hear the author out, because this could be taking a retrospective look at the series, right? Back in Smash 4, Cloud actually was considered one of the best characters in the game and very frustrating to play against, not only because he was extremely powerful, but also because he was exceptionally easy to play, so everyone had a pocket Cloud, and part of what made him so easy to play was Limit Break, particularly Limit Cross Slash. The thing is, this was recognized by the developers because when Cloud was brought into Ultimate, he was nerfed pretty heavily, and one of the biggest nerfs he took was to Limit Break. Oh,
I think his limit might have just timed. Oh, it did time man.
Out. And Cloud in Ultimate, while he's still considered quite a good character, Spargo, one of the best players in the world, uses him. He has never even remotely been on the chopping block. So this whole the most recent debate has been on Cloud thing here. Bullshit. I think what's actually happened here is the author has gone and dug up an old esports article or some old Reddit comments and just decided to run with it. No one who's even remotely familiar with competitive Smash would be saying this. It was frustrating enough for players to have Cloud banned from tournaments across the globe, including Spain and Canada. As far as I'm aware, Cloud was never banned from any ranked singles tournaments, maybe like some weird fringe locals here and there, but as far as actual national recognition or international recognition, no, it never happened. Doubles Cloud was. It still wasn't a universal thing, but Cloud was considered essentially mandatory in doubles and definitely over-centralizing, largely because of Limit Break. Depending on where you went for the latter part of Smash 4's life, it wasn't particularly uncommon to see either two Clouds or Cloud in general just banned from doubles. That's a pretty important distinction that the author would have, or at the very minimum should have mentioned if they knew that's what they were talking about. But considering this was written after all of Smash Ultimate's balance patches were done, and they're still referring to Cloud as the most recent ban discussion, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. What makes character bans so difficult, though, is that if it's not universal, all you're really doing is denying your region practice. We've seen this with Steve over the last couple of years, where a lot of North America tried banning him, but Japan, for example, just laughed at the idea. So what happens if you have North Americans from these regions traveling to other regions of North America where Steve isn't banned or going to international competitions? They're just not prepared for the matchup as much as people were. That never happened. The Steve bans haven't really stuck either, for the record, but saying that would still be more accurate than whatever this is. Okay, number 6, using items for an easy win. I think they're probably gonna get this one. It's common in competition to have all items switched off for a match. It's not common, it's universal. There are no exceptions, mainly because of how they can be used to unfairly gain a KO with just a press of a button and a little luck. The items that summon allies create an unfair advantage for the player who grabs that ally first, and especially in the case of Pokeballs, can decide the winner of a match. True. I know from the Smash Wiki and the Smash Brothers documentary that very early Melee tournaments did actually use items, but yeah, they were eventually turned off because they were causing too many issues, especially Pokeballs if I remember right. Even inanimate items can result in a KO just by throwing them at the other player at the right moment, not to mention that the placement of items is completely random, potentially giving a player an unfair advantage for no good reason. This is valid. You could retool items to be a bit more balanced and fair and have a competitive version of them. Brawlhalla essentially does this already. It's a very different take on the concept. Those items are weapons, which are integral parts of the character's movesets. But the fundamental principle is pretty sound. I think it was Mewtwo King who actually did advocate for an experimental rule set with items turned on low, the theory being that it would force players to stick to the center of the stage more. This was for Melee, mind you, where Jigglypuff air camping in particular has been a contentious issue. Would it work for Ultimate? You know, in some ways it might. A character like Steve segregating himself off in the corner mining materials actually cuts off his ability to get items too. It's not actually going to make the metagame any more fair. This is entirely a thought experiment, but maybe not nearly as unbalanced as you might think. Winning with an item has nothing to do with strategy or the type of characters that are at play, which is why it's considered a cheap way to win. This is not true at all. Nothing to do with strategy. I've been talking about that. Hold center stage and you'll get more items, and the better player without items is also going to be the better player with items. Some players do regularly practice item set play, and as you'd expect, it's largely the mains of characters that can create their own items, but not entirely. Sometimes it's just players who want to be more prepared for those matchups. And if items were guaranteed to show up in every match, then that would just be a skill that people would need to practice more. And the people who did would be rewarded. Or the type of characters that are at play, I'm going to call that one out too. Not every character makes equal use of items. Some have anti-projectile tools, some are faster so they can reach them more easily, some can take better advantage of them in combos. Matchups absolutely would make a difference. Now, if you're facing down a Kyogre that came out of a Master Ball or something like that, yeah, sure. Sometimes skill or matchup just fly out the window, but you can easily tailor a much more balanced item experience than that. I'll give this one to him, but it's not a particularly good explanation regardless, and this is very low-hanging fruit. Number 5, chasing after the Smash Ball. This is the same thing. This is the same thing! When the Smash Ball was first introduced to the franchise in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the special item added a whole new aspect to the game. While it was exciting to see each character's special moves, some were more effective at landing a KO than others and therefore labeled as overpowered. They really went ahead and said special move instead of final smash. Am I being pedantic here? Honestly, you know, I don't even think I am. If they said each character's ultimate move, like I've actually heard Final Smashes referred to multiple times over the years, or their big move, their big attack, their basically any phrase you could go with, I'd at least get it, but special move is about as big a fuck up as you can make here. Some were more effective at landing a KO than others and therefore labeled as overpowered. So the issue with Final Smashes has never really been the balance. Like, don't get me wrong, they're not all perfectly balanced, some are way better than others, but it's not like if they all were on equal footing then they'd be legal all of a sudden. The way bigger issue with Final Smashes is that they're all disproportionately disruptive to a match. The Smash Ball does make this far worse, but in Ultimate you can turn that off and still have Final Smash meters, which turns them into a weaker combat comeback mechanic version, and they were still resoundingly rejected by the competitive scene for being over-centralizing. They show up in just for fun tournaments here and there, and they are fun, and they're not nearly as bad as you might expect them to be, but they're still not taken seriously. The Smash Ball is just an item, so like any item, it spawns in a random spot, and that introduces the same kinds of consistency issues. So that's the section it should have been talked about, and Final Smash meters would have been an actually interesting one to talk about and would deserve their own section, and they are nowhere to be found in any of this. 4. Camping is what led several stages to be banned from tournaments. Okay, accurate. A player can be camping by hiding in an area of the stage that's hard to reach by other players. Once they are there, they sit in their protective space, taking advantage of the other player's struggle of reaching them, or waiting until the other players are weak enough for them to achieve an easy KO. I don't understand this final segment at all. Waiting until the other players are weak enough for them to achieve an easy KO. Are they talking about free-for-all? Free-for-all is not competitive gameplay and never has been, and if they're talking about doubles, the most generous interpretation I can give here is stock tanking, where one teammate plays more towards survival than the other, but that has essentially nothing to do with stage bans, so I don't get that. And as far as singles goes, well, first off, they said other players, which is a shame because that's the competitive format where camping is actually most relevant, and you could make a vague argument they might be talking about charging your comeback mechanic up or waiting for your opponent's comeback mechanic to go down, but even in that case, this isn't Fortnite, right? While you're camping your opponent, it's not like they're building up storm damage the entire time, and almost no characters have comeback mechanics, and even fewer have comeback mechanics that expire. So I have literally no idea what this is supposed to mean. Characters with a greater jumping ability, like Princess Peach, can take advantage of camping, especially in the air. I'm almost certain they're talking about the famous Congo jungle game in Melee, which was not actually the reason that stage ended up being banned, but it's a common enough misconception and is used almost as shorthand. I've done that myself, that I get it. Meta Knight and Brawl would have been a much better example, though. There are multiple stages in that game that are banned pretty much entirely because of him. The stage Yoshi's Island N64 is a major example, as players would camp on the clouds in the stage, attacking any player who would approach them. Okay, good point. You got this one. Yeah, Temple still has to be the most ubiquitous camping stage, especially because it's so popular casually, but Yoshi's Island definitely is up there too. Those clouds are very funny casually, have no place in competition. Now, camping is by no means the only reason Smash stages are banned. This doesn't mention hazards on the stage at all. That's a big one. It doesn't talk about blast zones being way too small on some stages. It doesn't talk about walls leading to infinites or pseudo-infinites. Still not particularly deep or well-researched, but overall, not bad compared to the others. Number 3, utilizing self-destructing moves repeatedly. What? And why is the picture Pikachu doing thunder? That's not even a self-destruct move. It was unavoidable to have some characters with powerful moves that could be used with little to no downtime just based on how they are in their own games, but these moves are much more of a headache in Smash Bros. What? Utilizing self-destructing moves repeatedly, a picture of Pikachu using thunder, a move with a lot of downtime, this sentence. None of these have anything to do with each other. Powerful attacks like Pikachu's Thunderbolt. Do they mean thunder? Or do they mean Thunder Jolt? I honestly don't know. Either way, Pikachu doesn't have an attack called Thunderbolt. Are great at covering a bigger field while dealing a good amount of damage. So I guess Thunder? This could still be either of them, but the problem is when people abuse the move for the wrong reasons. What? What is going on? Some players have been caught using destructive moves like these to take down their own teams, or at the very least ruin the experience of other players. I hadn't gotten to this part yet before I decided to make this video. Video games, at the end of the day, they're not the most important things in the universe. I'm under absolutely no delusions about that, but there are still professional standards I try and hit, and I like to think I would be trying to hit no matter what I was doing. How do you write something this careless and have other people approve it to go to print? I don't understand. Smash does have plenty of self-destructing moves. You've got characters like Chrom or Ike who can do it with their drag down up specials. You've got characters like Kirby, Wario, and King Dedede that can latch onto their opponent. You've got someone like Steve who can blow him and his opponent up. You've got someone like Hero who can blow him and his opponent up in the most spectacular way possible. This point is already dead on arrival because, heads up, using any of those self-destructing moves repeatedly is not banned and never has been. But even then, it might at least open the floodgates for a discussion on how, for example, back in Smash 4, Bowser's Bowser side or Koopa side used to be ruled differently. Even though Bowser died first, there was a period in Smash 4 where if he initiated that move and both him and his opponent died, he would artificially be considered to have died second, which meant in last stock situations he would actually win even if the result screen said otherwise. It hasn't stayed that way and is a completely irrelevant, outdated ruling nowadays, but you can talk about it, right? And then we get to Pikachu's Thunder. here, which based on this picture, I have to assume they're talking about instead of Thunder Jolt, but I can't even be sure about that because in the earlier section where they were talking about stage bans, they show a picture of a ledge trump for some reason on a legal stage from Smash 4, but at least some of the pictures have been relevant to the information or misinformation in these segments, so I have to assume they're talking about Thunder here. The big problem with that is even if we want to take the absolute loosest definition possible for self-destruct move and just take it as a move where you hit yourself with a projectile, even though it's not self-destructive, it doesn't do any damage to Pikachu, let's stretch it out even slightly further than that, right? Say it's Pichu's Thunder instead, which does in fact do a bit of self-damage, so it's more relevant. Utilizing Thunder repeatedly is also not banned. Some players have been caught using destructive moves like these to take down their own teams. I mean, if you end up with a teammate who's constantly hitting you with his own Thunder, that sucks, but he's probably not going to be your teammate for very long. And it's also not illegal. Smash Doubles is played with Team Attack on for very good reason, which means yes, you can hit your teammate. And while it's usually an accident, that's not actually always the case. Incineroar players will often have their teammates attack him on purpose so that he can build revenge up. Same with Mr. Game & Watch filling his bucket. Every player can hit their teammate out of free fall to give them their up specials back, or lightly tap their opponent if their shield was broken or they were put to sleep, or just run into the middle of a dog pile and hit everyone with something that isn't going to hurt their teammate that badly. So the notion of banning players from doing stuff like that, especially only on certain moves, is ludicrous. And I think what they're driving at here is the real heart of the issue, or at the very least ruin the experience of other players. Again, that sucks, but ruining the experience of other players is not illegal. In an actual competitive setting, that's entirely on you for choosing the wrong teammate, and my god, even then, there are so many worse moves than Pikachu's Thunder that could be abusing there. And while this may be a bit of a stretch, like I said, we're getting at the heart of the issue here. I don't think this actually is about competitive play. To me, this seems way more like the author just whining about something that happened to them, or at the very least witnessed happening at a house party or whatever. And I know full well they're not a competitive player. Yeah, this entire article sucks, but section 3 is literally one of the worst things I've ever read. All right, number 2, starting or trying to start taunting matches. Oh my god, what the fuck? Online and in tournaments, it can be pretty obnoxious to deal with when you're looking for a serious match. Obnoxious to deal with and banned are not the same thing. Some tournaments have banned taunting completely to push players to focus on taking the match more seriously. I don't know what they're talking about here. I can't guarantee that no Smash tournament has ever banned taunting, but it's not something I've ever heard of. It's definitely not the standard, because the thing is, while sure, it's on the fringe side, it does have legitimate combat application beyond just trying to do mental damage to your opponent. That's especially true in Ultimate, where taunts are cancelable, so you can use them to, for example, set off your opponent's Twitch reaction, essentially using it as a fake out attack, or you can make them think they have time to hit you out of the taunt when they actually don't. And then, of course, you have characters like Snake and Luigi and Kazuya whose taunts are actual attacks with hitboxes on them. In practice, they very rarely come up, and you can almost always be doing something better, but they don't never come up, and who are you to dictate what attack a player should be using in a given scenario? On a more controversial note, Nintendo themselves have banned taunts indefinitely from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Online, which, yeah, like I said, is controversial because there are actual gameplay implications to it. And, you know, people just want to taunt, but still, the gameplay implications. And here's the thing, it's not banned from lobbies, it's just banned from the default online modes like Elite Smash, and those aren't competitive modes. Elite Smash is closer, but it's still not actual formal competitive play, and that's even before we get into the wacky rule set stuff. So what is it doing in this article about competitive play? And then number 1. Oh no. Oh no. Using the fastest characters to avoid attacks. Look at that, it's Sonic again. Speed is just another ability that certain characters excel in more than others, but it should never be used solely to avoid fighting in a match. Again, this just sounds more like personal complaints, like a moral compass that they're attempting to impose onto the match. Again, allow me to point you to the title of the article. That's not what this is supposed to be about. The characters with speed as their advantage can spam running across a large stage and succeed at never being hit. There is some truth to this. It's not absolute by any means, though. The stage list in Smash Ultimate is widely considered to be a bit too focused on large terrain, which arguably makes life too easy for zoners and, yes, very fast characters. But even for Sonic, the fastest character in Ultimate, who's the poster child for this issue and clearly who the author is talking about, he can't actually just spam dash all the time, and Sonic's the best Sonic player in the world, thinks that camping is not actually a totally viable strategy in all matchups, and it certainly wouldn't be if all he could do was run. And if that turned out not to be the case, we later on discovered that, yeah, no, Sonic could literally just run from one side of the map to the other and no one could do anything about it. Then maybe people would actually legitimately start talking about that strategy being banned, but as is, like so much stuff in this article,
it's not banned.
The problem isn't the speed itself, since with the right timing, any player can give damage to even the fastest characters. so that doesn't sound like much of a problem then. The problem lies with players who abuse the speed to stay out of the fight. Well, that shouldn't be a problem if your timing's good enough you can damage even the fastest characters, right? This strategy is a combination of stalling and camping. It is camping. Yes, that's the definition of camping in Smash. It is not stalling though. I've already talked about stalling indefinitely, and that has actual rulings against it. Again, it can be annoying. I'm not arguing about that, and if this article was called 8 Annoying Smash Bros Strategies, we might be in business here.
8 Smash Brothers Tricks that aren't allowed competitively.
While this may work for the player utilizing the strategy, it ruins the match for the other players and everyone else. So once again, it ruins the match for the other players. To reiterate, free-for-all is not competitive play, and this is not a thing in doubles. It's also considered a very cheap win and is the reason why certain levels like Hyrule's Temple are banned from tournaments. You talked about this already. Also, Hyrule's Temple, Hyrule Temple, or just Temple. That is a very small nitpick in the grand scheme of this article, but it just feels so appropriate to wind things down by mistyping probably Smash's single most iconic stage. So yeah, bottom line, this was horrendous from start to finish, and I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I honest to God cannot remember another instance where the author just seemed so wildly out of their comfort zone. Like the Pro Guide's link guide that I also roasted a couple years back was really bad, don't get me wrong, but that's a video. As far as articles go, I had some issues with those too, but they were never this bad. As a reminder though, seriously stay away from the people involved. A roasting and a correcting of misinformation is as much as they deserve, and I honestly don't actually know if this was the author's fault or not. Did they decide to hack together a terrible article about subject matter they knew nothing about and then try and slip one past the publisher? Or did the publisher tell them to write an article about subject matter they knew nothing about? I don't know. Either way, it ultimately comes down to CBR for not having very good quality control on this one, and either way, hopefully some people who saw this article will eventually see the video too and get some misinfo cleared up. And I think that'll do it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. This was an ordeal for me. What did you think of it? Likes and comments go a long way towards helping a video be passed around in YouTube's algorithm, so if you think this one deserved it, much appreciated. You can check out another MockRock Talk video here, video from my main channel MockRock below, and patrons, members, and subs get cool perks like early videos and Discord access. Later, people.